seated. I'd like to invite the children to come up and join me. You know, sometimes when we come to church, we make Christianity sound really, really difficult. Lots of ideas to wrap our heads around. Words that have to be said just right. Ideas of theology that we wrestle with. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Christianity is, as an idea at least, really pretty simple. At least in terms of what we are supposed to do because of what God has done. That simple idea is where you guys come in. Because Christianity at its heart, in its expression, is about doing things like welcoming and making friends with people who are not like us. About feeding people who are hungry, about clothing people who are naked and sheltering people who are homeless, visiting with folks who are lonely, not holding grudges, but instead forgiving and loving everybody, even people who might not be very nice to us. And the reason you guys are important for this is because the longer you live on earth, the harder it is to remember all of this. We adults have had a long time to build up our grudges at people who have hurt us and who are not like us. We've had a long time to start thinking that it must be harder than what it really is. You guys aren't like that yet, hopefully. For you, you can still remember those easy lessons. And then you can teach us. You can remind us that somebody needs our love, our care, our forgiveness, and that nothing is more important than any of that. So I'm commissioning all of you today. Mom and dads and grandparents may not be happy with me for this, but I'm commissioning you to be able to say to us when we're not getting it right. To remind us that words like "I'm sorry" and "I forgive you" and "would you like to come play" are just about the most important things that we Christians can ever say. And if you guys remind us of all of that, then all of us will start to remember and live out what it means to be who we are meant to be. Let's go get some stamps. Come here. Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. Stay put. You just want to go back. Want to go back? Okay. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. I've been thinking a lot about these words this week, and particularly about what it means for us to lose our lives for the sake of Jesus, for the sake of the gospel. We all know the stories about those great acts of heroism. I've talked from the pulpit before about John Daniels giving his life for a fellow sister in Christ. We all know stories from the military of soldiers throwing their bodies on a grenade so that their buddies can live. We know about people like Martin Luther King or Harvey Milk who give their lives while working for justice for their communities. Those kinds of heroic acts are probably what first comes to mind when we think about losing our lives, and thank God most of us will never ever face those kinds of opportunities of literally giving our lives in that way. When we get beyond stories like those, maybe next we think about people like St. Francis or Mother Teresa, people who give up everything, not because they're going to go die, but because they're going to spend the whole rest of their life in service to their fellow human beings. And most of us probably aren't going to live up to that kind of a courageous example either, if for no other reason. I know in my own case, if I give up everything, it's not just my own life I'm affecting, but a little 5-year-old who's expecting to be fed and housed. And it's one thing to ask myself to go without, and it's another thing entirely to put that on him. And other parents in the room share that quandary, and those of us who are caring for elderly parents or for others know that we can't always just walk away from all of it, even if we might want to. I think for most of us, losing our life is something that happens in fits and starts. A little bit here, a little bit there, having to remember over and over and over again that we're called ourselves to pick up the cross. Losing our lives is probably for most of us more about remembering that the stories that the world tells to us about how we are supposed to be aren't really the truth. That the gospel's the truth, and that everything else is really a distraction, pulling us away from being who we're really meant to be. Society tells us that what's most important is stuff and status. And here's Jesus telling us that what's most important is dying for others. As I pulled into the lot this morning, I did what I often do and oohed and ahed at the fun toys that so many of you drive into the lot on Sunday morning. We're a gadget congregation. We like our fancy technology. I include myself in that. My Prius is not quite so new and shiny as it once was, but I remember what I was like when I got it. And it's not bad to have those fancy cars or fun toys, but maybe sometimes dying to self, giving up our lives means that instead of buying the newest and latest, that we become satisfied with the car that's already parked in the driveway, the one that might have a couple 100,000 miles on it but still runs just fine. Of course, we all know that we're told in our lives that one of the most important things is to do those things that gets the positive attention of our bishops or our commanding officers or our managers or whoever else it is, so that we get the next promotion or the cushy postings or whatever else it is. And maybe there again, losing our lives means letting other people have that stuff and doing the things that won't get any credit, and letting ourselves get sent out on the jobs that nobody else wants. We always have to wrestle with these stories that we build in our lives, because society tells us again that what's most important is to remember all of the ways in which we've been done wrong over the years. All of the ways in which we are the victims, and in a way other people are the bad guys. And maybe some of losing our lives then becomes letting go of those stories and the grudges that we carry, and just getting on with being alive in the world. The Christian life is always a life of the cross. The place where joy and sorrow meet, the place where wealth and poverty meet, the place where them and us meet. And losing our lives means being willing to stand in that uncomfortable place where things don't always fit neatly together, where you can't draw clean lines, where what we're left with at the end of the day is more questions, maybe, than answers. To take up our cross and follow Jesus is indeed to lose our lives. And to do that fully, we need to remember that Jesus began losing his own life far before the act of crucifixion. The incarnation itself is an act of losing life. God did not have to become human. And yet God gives up in order to become one of us. When God decides to become human, God didn't have to choose peasant parents in what was then roughly the armpit of the known world in Palestine. What about the Roman court or some other wealthy place? But it's not there that God comes, but to marginalized people who were considered pretty much the least of everybody within the entire Roman Empire. Jesus could have spent his teaching ministry saying things that would have pleased the scribes, the priests, the others in authority. It's easy enough to do. Say a few helpful hints for happy living and don't shake the boat too much. But instead, his entire ministry is always about turning the world upside down and upsetting those in power and challenging all of us to rethink again and again and again what it means to be who we are. All of that is a loss of life before the cross. To be Christian, to be a follower of Jesus, is indeed to lose your life. over and over and over again. To do it willingly, out of solidarity with those who have no choice but to be losing their lives, those who are poor, those who are sick, those who are marginalized for any reason. To join with Jesus in giving ourselves up so that we can lift others up, so that we too can be lifted up, not by our own bootstraps, but by the power of God. The power of God moving within us. The power of God moving in our brothers and sisters. If we want to see Jesus, not as we would make him, but as he is, as the God who gives himself for us, then we have to be willing to follow him where he goes. Through the cross and into that kingdom that waits on the other side, the kingdom where we are, all of us, children of God, and where there is nothing that separates us. We can see that kingdom now, even if it's only in little bits and pieces. Each and every time that we become willing to die for one another, each and every time we are willing to give up our lives for the sake of Jesus and the good news that he has given us to share, each time we're willing to lose ourselves so that we can be found again in that kingdom of love where God is even now calling us all to dwell.